All right, I've got my friend Patrick Lynch on the line with me live. Patrick, it's great to see you.
It's great to see you, Jonathan. How you doing, man?
I am doing so good. This weekend we are talking about leadership, and I can't help but just think when I think of leadership, especially in our community, I can't help but think of you and all the amazing things that you've gotten to do through the last years. And man, it just feels like I think you and I were kind of getting started at a similar timeline in the community on a national level, and it just feels like that was yesterday. And then I kind of
Hmm,
blink and look back and go, man, that was like 10 or 11 years ago.
that's
So
crazy.
a lot's changed, obviously, in our community. Not only clinically speaking, have a lot of things changed, but also just the environment we're working in. You've been doing events similar to this. You've been on doing video projects for much longer, I think, than any of us have. That's kind of your specialty. And so I've been just looking forward to this conversation because I felt like this is a great opportunity to learn from you and to talk a little bit about what it means to start a new project and to become a leader in this community. And so thanks for doing this today and being a part of it. And most importantly, I think what a lot of people want to know, I think, is what is your why? Like, why did you want to get involved in really giving your life away in a way that's meaningful to the hemophilia community?
As you mentioned, I have hemophilia. My brother was also born with hemophilia, and when I was 21 and he was 18, he passed away from an untreated head bleed that he sustained while in college. And while we never were able to pinpoint what exactly happened to his head, what we did discover was that he had no factor in his system at the time he died. He had clearly fallen off of his prophylaxis regimen, had not been adherent, and it left him vulnerable so that while the medicine, the life sustaining and saving medicine, was 3 feet from his head underneath his bed, but it wasn't in his body.
Mm.
And so I went to school for acting. Actually, interestingly enough, like a lot of guys and girls that I meet in our community, I grew up loving baseball and basketball and trying to play as much as I could, but was challenged constantly by hemophilia and my inhibitors and the whole nine. I eventually found the arts and found a home there in a place where I could have my own team and a shared goal and this exciting exploratory thing. It had a lot that sports had, but it wasn't testing my body in the unhealthy ways that sports would for someone with hemophilia like me. So the arts became a haven. And then after school, my brother actually died. I went to college for theater. I have a degree in acting, which is an interesting degree to have, but I have a degree in acting. And my brother unfortunately passed away 4 weeks before school ended. So I had some good opportunities right out of school to work, and I did for a couple years, but I was disturbed by what happened to my brother. And the piece that really plagued me, especially as I started to go to more and more local, regional, national meetings, connecting with people on social media from across the community, 10, 11, 12 years ago, I started to get really curious about what happened to my brother and why it happened, because we grew up in the same house, same diagnosis, same treater, same primary caregiver. So like where did something go wrong that he fell off of his regimen when that's not been something that's been a part of my life? And what I distilled it to was that he never identified with hemophilia. He had it. It was on a chart, it was on a piece of paper, it was on a bracelet, it was on a prescription, but in his DNA, he did not operate from a place where he identified himself as someone who had hemophilia, because he didn't try to play sports. He wasn't pushing those boundaries. He didn't develop an inhibitor. We had a mom who's a RN who took great care of us. We had a leading pediatric hematologist in Donna D. McKelly at the New York Presby. So he was really well taken care of, but almost to a detriment, so that he did not have this identity as someone who had a manageable, but at its core, life-threatening chronic disease to manage. And so, unfortunately, he suffered the worst case scenario. And my why for the work I do, it became, well, what can I create that enables people like my brother, who aren't necessarily responding to conventional means of outreach or education, who aren't going to sit in a conference room at a hotel to listen to a presenter, who don't want to have to sit through a webinar that's, you know, about really important information, but dense and just not for a 14-year-old. I wanted to create content, which at the time I started this, people were like, what is content? And that was the first question all the time. What is content? What is content? What is content? Now I'm like, oh, okay. I wanted to create content that would help people like him identify with having a bleeding disorder. And my tool, my background, my thing is entertainment. So how can entertainment be a vehicle for change? How can that be our Trojan horse for engagement, which leads to education, which leads to empowerment? We entertain so that we can engage in order to educate so that they're empowered. That's the series. And the first project that we started with was Stop the Bleeding, the comedy web series that is going into its 10th season this August. And that was directly in response to trying to reach people like Adam, and everything that has grown has come from that same why of where can we use entertainment and our unique ability to tell stories in ways that lead to positive health outcomes for patients and families in this community.
Yeah, wow. That's so powerful, man. And you know, that the fact that motivated you to jump into action and create something almost that had never been done. I mean, there really, up until that point when you started Stop the Bleeding, there had never been a YouTube channel that was dedicated strictly to, capturing and entertaining, the community in that vehicle. I think, we have seen these developments that probably will become more and more that we'll all depend on, especially in times like this. We're depending on all of that kind of technology now to really get a lot of our information from. But when you started this, that was super early on. And so you having that vision and dream was connected. You bring up a good point about you took both your skill that you had and your education that you had and your passion, and you also converted that and brought that into really your pain, and it was those two things together that really became an exponentially important mission for your life. And so seeing you convert that into something that's tangible for people every day, and now I don't think any of us could live actively in the community without thinking about Stop the Bleeding or maybe even the Blood Cast Media, the podcast that you're doing. I mean, it's just really incredible, the information that you're putting out. And I just think, man, what is it that when you think about trying to take your dream and your passion and convert that to something actionable, you're one of the best at being able to kind of eat the elephant. So what is it that made you say, hey, I want to start pursuing this, and gave you the courage to take the risk to step out and do it?
Good questions. I'm going to blank on the guy's name, but there's an author, and one of his books, Good to Great, it's a business book, and it looks at these different businesses and how Jim Collins, and how some go on to be good and others great, and what's the difference. And one of the principles that stuck with me as a new graduate out of school, working as an actor, not sure what my path was going to be, and almost immediately, and as a working actor, I do feel the need to say this, my primary source of income those years was from acting. So while I was working survival jobs and doing other stuff, I had reason to believe that, all right, if I keep going here, this is what the life looks like. And I'd worked with enough people. I had a decent sense of what that looked like, barring something just, that blows you up and makes you a megastar. What does it look like to just be a working actor? And I had that sense, but I had a sense that was not going to be where my path led, that I had something else to do with these skills. And Jim Collins has this hedgehog principle that essentially looks at 3 concentric circles. The first being, what do you have undying passion for? The kind of passion that doesn't allow obstacles to be seen. What is that? What can you be the best in the world in? So what skill or trade do you have that you have ability above and beyond most, and the capacity to perhaps be the best in the world? And then where is there an economic engine that supports activities in the sphere that you're describing? So I thought about that, and I thought about, okay, so what passion, skill, economic engine. And I started thinking about what I wanted to do to reach young people with bleeding disorders. And the concept for Stop the Bleeding, a mockumentary styled after The Office, so that it feels like a documentary. I'm in it as a guy with hemophilia, so there's a really interesting blurring of the fourth wall. We do interviews where we talk direct to camera, opportunity to speak directly to the community, and we can spoof and have fun with all of these things that I know are okay to joke about because I have the thing and I've grown up with it and with these people, but we're gonna weave through that the important takeaways that are the reason we're doing this to begin with. So that was how I started. It was pretty, once I had that concept introduced to me, then I thought, that's clever. And I've always been interested, I'm someone who's interested in being great at the things I do and has a tough time when I'm not too good at sticking with something. Like I'm not interested in being a jack of all trades, probably to a fault. And then with the stuff that I am good on, I want to get better and better and better and better. And from a business standpoint, you know, we're talking leadership, but from a business standpoint, that ability to hone and specify and super serve a niche, as it were, has actually served me very well. Super serving a niche is something we talk about quite a bit on YouTube, because that's literally the best way you can build a YouTube channel is super serve a niche. Decide who your audience is and serve them, serve them, serve them. Don't think about diversifying or what else. They just give them what they want. And that's how you keep them coming back to YouTube.
That's so good. Wow. Well, you know, I know that, you know, with the Stop the Bleeding YouTube, you know, you bring that whole concept into it, and over 3,000 followers, I know, on the Blood Feed, YouTube channel, got over 3 million views. I mean, there's some really amazing things that have taken place for you in the last few years. And it takes a lot of courage to sort of keep that going, but also take a chance to get out there and cast vision, break that down into tangible deliverables, you know, and then get the buy-in to be able to do that. You talked about business being a key part of that. You know, these are all leadership skills that somebody, you know, it was the old saying, it's like, you know, we're professionals, don't try this at home. You know, there's an aspect is that we're all amateurs. Every one of us is an amateur, and we set out to do something and achieve a goal. And we don't even know that we're professionals until everyone else says it. It's not even us saying it. And so I look at these, you know, the chairman of our board of directors, he always says, we practice experiments. We don't do perfection. And I love that, because he's like, you know, we're constantly, if you're in the science lab and you're constantly doing experiments, failure is actually an intrinsic part of that. You actually achieve to fail more because you know that that's one less opportunity that you're going to have to worry about having to revisit. And so, you know, I think that you're an expert at being able to do this, but at the same time being able to identify the need that meets a meaningful purpose. And so, man, I just applaud you for all of the work and the effort that's gone into that. One of the things that I think that I've just observed with you personally is that you are a great vision caster to getting people on board, and that takes an exceptional skill. But you've got to have a positive outcome, and so I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit. As far as just, obviously, the name of our organization is Hope, and you have one of the most hopeful outlooks and positive outlooks when it comes to. You got to believe that what you're going to do is not just going to make a difference, but it's going to be something that can be achieved, right? I mean, your mindset is critical to being able to do something successful, wouldn't you say?
I would, yeah. It's funny. Your organization's Hope and mine's Believe, but our title is Believe Limited. And you know, over the years, people have said, "Why is it Believe Limited? Shouldn't it be Believe Unlimited?" And I would argue, if it was Believe Unlimited, you wouldn't need the second word. The reason it's Believe Limited is because belief is never unlimited, at least as it becomes action. So everything we work on is built on ideating and conceptualizing and believing and hoping and aspiring and trying to create from what is not. But in order to do that, there's a timeline and there's a budget and there are stakeholders and there are caveats and there are legal reviews and there There's all kinds of stuff that limits the scope of the belief. However, that's not a reason to not go forward. In fact, now you have a structure whereby you can go forward. There is the expression, freedom comes from structure begets freedom, freedom comes from structure. I think Believe Limited captures that very idea. We do vision cast and think ahead and try to really go. We talk about our mission all the time. We are a for-profit entity. We're a content agency and a film production company, but we're mission driven. We're not creating commercials for Doritos. That's just not our interest.
Right.
Our interest is in trying to create entertainment that makes a change, and we have found we are doing very well in these areas. So we continue to look for where are the other pockets that we can continue to bring people in through content and through means of engagement that other people are not, to the word you used, experimenting with. It's interesting. Medicine is a practice. It's literally called a practice. And yet all of us, not even on the medicine, not even on the medical side, but on the advocacy and engagement side, the degree to which there's a need to feel certain and we have to really hone in. It's a practice. It's a practice. And from that practice, we can only do our best to understand what our options are and there's only so much certainty in something called a practice. Mm-hmm. And I think our ability to see that as an opportunity to help people understand through communication and content, there's a lot of information and there's a lot of unknowns that are facing people who are affected by chronic diseases, specifically in the case of our conversation, a bleeding disorder. And if we can use our skill sets and our tools to help bridge some of those gaps, and then along the way have opportunities to create some, forget about gap bridgers, but just entirely new initiatives, something like Bombardier Blood. That wasn't bridging a gap. That was, here's a unique opportunity. We are at the intersection of quite a moment. And if we can rally the troops in the right way, we could create something extraordinary where alternatively the feat might be accomplished, but the communal participation in it and the worldwide energy that we can cultivate won't be the same, and it won't be recorded for forever. So there's an element of bridging gaps that we're uniquely well suited to fill, and then also seeking those opportunities, or in the case of Bombardier Blood, for example, responding. Chris came to me first, responding to an opportunity when it comes about. And that's something I think, talking about leadership and how do you kind of plan a course, you can't prepare for those moments. You can't prepare for, hey, can I sit down with you? I'm a mountain climber. I've climbed 5 summits of the 7. I'm looking to do Everest. I'd be one of the 500 people to ever do all 7, the first with hemophilia. And I want to show what is and is not possible with hemophilia, depending upon your access to medicine. I didn't wake up that morning thinking I was going to have that presented to me. And here I am 3.5, 4 years later. And in between this, I'm still emailing people about the PR for the upcoming release. Like, it's still going. So there's it's a tough thing being able to both have a vision, like you said, get people to appreciate it in the way you do, which means you have to sit with it and spend time with it. And, it has to come from a deep place within myself before I'm going to work too hard to try to rally people to something. Because to your point, there's so much work necessary that if I'm going to start, I want to have high confidence that we can get on board, we can break this into deliverables, we can find the right partners, we can timeline this thing, we can produce this, we can distribute this, we can account for this. And if I don't feel very confident about every element of that, I'm likely to not bother going down that path because there's simply too much going on. If it was a slower time or if some projects go away, then there's more time for that kind of real broad ideating. But given how busy we are, I really try to be smart about when and how I attempt to vision cast around a particular idea. Just to put a fine point on the previous thing I was saying though, vision cast great, but the ability to respond, the ability to be ready when an opportunity presents or when circumstances change, as this year has illustrated in profound ways, I think that's as much a part of success in leadership, in trying to create where there wasn't entrepreneurial endeavors. They both demand a vision and a commitment to that vision and an ability to be responsive to the doors that open along the way. And I think something that I think I do well is marry those two things. Here's where I'm going, and here's where I want to be. Here's what's becoming available to me. Okay, let's go back. What are the goals? What are our resources available to meet those goals? What's this new opportunity over here? What does that mean for our goals? Let's go back to the paperwork. How can we merge all this in a way that's synergistic if we can? And if we can't, let's be honest about that too. In the long run, the ability to do that is what takes an organization from year 1 to year 2, from year 2 to year 5, from year 5 to year 8. So yeah, charting a course, but being flexible. It's a like a lot of things in life, as much as we may want it to be one thing or another, it's a balance.
Yeah, so true. So true. I'm going to ask you a question that we didn't really talk about before, but I think you're going to be able to answer well. And that is that, what would you say that hemophilia, lessons you've learned from living with hemophilia, have taught you that have converted to being able to lead in an uncertain environment?
I think hemophilia has given me empathy in a way that I would not otherwise have it. And that has enabled me to meet my wife and connect with my wife, just another human on an intimate level. That empathy has enabled me to be a documentarian and have people willing to sit in front of me and share their stories with me and be very vulnerable in very public ways with me. I mean, I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds. I mean, I probably interviewed over 1,000 people in the last 10 years. And I think empathy has been a large part of, to whatever degree those interviews have been successful, the success. And then growing up with kids who had hemophilia or von Willebrand disease or sickle cell or mitochondrial disease or cerebral palsy or spina bifida or HIV. I grew up at these camps with kids who had all kinds of stuff. And I realized, as well, we all got something different, but we all have an other experience. We all come to this camp because somewhere else in the world, we feel like others. And what's interesting, this might sound weird to say, but just to be honest, when I was a 21-year-old actor, 6'2", 185 pounds, brown hair, nice jaw, young man, all-American guy. These are the things I'm going out for. And I like to think I'm a good actor, and I was getting some of these jobs. And what was funny to me was I felt so far away from the opportunities that would come based on how I presented as an actor trying to get a job. And that's fine. Like, that's the gig. Like, that's what being an actor is. But what I was never really able to reconcile when I was doing capital P, capital A professional acting was that my inner truth was always more akin to the characters in scripts who I wasn't getting the opportunities to play. It was the people who were struggling with a sense of identity and a deep sense of meaning and longing. It was this other urge. It wasn't an urge to be seen or heard, just see me, hear me. It was like, no, I have something to say. Like, I have a point of view. I'm here as an artist, not a meat puppet just to talk with your words in my mouth. Like, it's coming from somewhere else. And that's something I was never able to really successfully articulate to an agent or a manager or even like colleague actor friends. That never, I wasn't able to find the right words. But I know when I've talked about this other thing, feeling like an other with hemophilia, with other people in the community, they get it. So yeah, that otherness, that feeling like an other has helped me develop a sense of empathy so that as I have become an adult and I get to make some decisions and choices and, set a culture rather than have to just respond to the one I'm in, empathy is generally a leading driver.
That's so good. That's so good, man. I feel like that so many of the lessons that we learn from living with hemophilia is part of what equips us to be able to be leaders in other spheres as well, as the hemophilia community. So a lot of the people watching this today are they're kind of, they may be leading in their job. Maybe they're currently working for, I have friends that have bleeding disorders that are working with Social Security right now. I have other friends that are, working at Exxon, or they're working at various types of places. And so these people are thinking about, how do I take the lessons that I've learned? And many of them make the best leaders. I mean, some of these people are in the medical field. You and I know a lot of the same people that are working to venture into becoming hematologists that are working, and they themselves are living with hemophilia. And so the lessons that we've learned, as whether it be the discipline that it takes to have a regimen that you've got to stick to, whether you like it or don't like it, or whether it's that you have to learn how to get yourself out of bed when you don't feel like getting out of bed, or whether it is, hey, I've got a, the elephant is, how do I, live a normal lifestyle without having really severe joint disease, by taking infusions every day, or whatever that looks like for you. And so those types of lessons that we learn while living with hemophilia and wrestling with the things that we've got to wrestle with, I think have something. They give us a skill, they give us an understanding of something that really can empower us, if we will embrace them, to be able to be great leaders in whatever sphere of influence it is. And again, you have been a great example of that, from starting it with Stop the Bleeding and Blood and Bombardier Blood, as you mentioned earlier, and so many other things. One of the things that continues to come back to mind for me is Winston Churchill's quote, where he said, never give up, never give up, never give up. That was his whole speech, and I think about those moments. It's like, man, you have just kept going and you've never given up. And I just, again, want to applaud you and thank you for doing all that you've done for our community, because it really is remarkable.
So I gotta share a little something with you that is along the lines of that Churchill quote. And this was something, I just pulled this off of my bookshelf that's next to us here. I wrote this at some point when I needed to. It's not particularly profound, but it was important. When they don't know you, keep going. When they ignore you, keep going. When they reject you, keep going. When they accept you, keep going. When they celebrate you, keep going. When they forget about you, keep going. Whatever they do, you just keep going. And I have that hanging up here because there's more than one day of the year that I don't feel like continuing to keep going, when it doesn't feel worth the fight, when it's like, I can't have another conversation about how we make this thing work, or how am I gonna take this from this to that, or, oh, did I really say I was gonna do this? And just reminding myself that it goes back to the why. Like, I know why I'm doing what I'm doing, and the circumstances around it, the who, what, when, where, and everything else is, it drops down from that why. That why is everything. So if that why is strong, whether something that I'm doing in that moment is being really, if people are watching it or listening to it, or if they're not, if people like it or they don't, if it's getting a lot of attention or it's not, if it's celebrated or if it's not, if someone says, people call me the wrong name all the time. I'm called James constantly. It's my middle name, so it's not the wrong name, but it's like, I don't care. And then people feel mortified, and it's like, I don't care. It's like, we're still talking about the thing. Like, I'm going to keep going. Like, all of this is circumstance. I just have to keep going. And you can call me whatever you want, as long as you let me be here. So yeah, I think there's something to that. Now, on the same token, actually, this is a good flip. So that same quote, I think you know this, maybe you don't though, we'll find out. Before I started my work in hemophilia, one of my jobs in life was as a professional poker player. And I learned a lot of stuff about life from poker. I basically break life into either like a game of basketball, a game of poker, an experience at camp, or something that happened in theater. Like, those are my 4 analogy zones that I draw from. And in the poker one, when online poker was abruptly banned from the US, April 15th, 2011, at that time, I was a pretty, I mean, I was professional, I was successful, I had some small sponsorships, I was a featured blogger on a poker site, whatever else. And within a week of the poker world changing, I made the decision. I was wondering, like, oh, okay, online poker's no more. Am I going to move to Las Vegas and play live full time? Am I going to move to Ireland and live with family to play online in Ireland? What am I going to do here? I've made a unique choice about how I want to raise money for projects I want to do by playing poker. So what's my next move? But that why that I just gave you was sort of the most important thing. I'm doing this to make money to fund projects that I want to. All right, well, the means whereby I can fund those projects, i.e. playing online poker successfully in these ways that I've become pretty hedgehog principle strong in, that's gone away. So any version of what if I went here, what if I did this, what if I did that, maybe it's keep going, but I actually think it's chasing a means whereby, whereas the means whereby we're in service of a goal. The goal hasn't changed. I want to do my own projects. I want to create entertainment that makes a difference. I'm just not going to be able to make my riches in the world of online poker. So a week after it went away, and I was playing tournaments that were 2,500, 5,000. I played in one $10,000 tournament. A lot of money moving around. And I went back a week later to a job in Manhattan, in Soho, making $11 an hour to answer phones for a restaurant. And it was humbling. It was also very alleviating because I didn't have the mental emotional stress that I had had for quite a long time with poker being the way I made money. When my job was done, I could just forget about it. And it gave me the mental bandwidth to develop what became Stop the Bleeding. So I tell that story because I mentioned being a blogger and having some small sponsorships. There was a guy I was building something with, and when I told him, hey man, obviously the world's turning upside down, everybody's making their decisions about what they are doing as a result of this in the poker world, I think it's time for me to move on. So I'm going to be doing that. And Jonathan, he demonstrated a great example of what a leader doesn't do, which is he heard that someone he was excited to work with was making a different decision. He felt feelings about that, sad, maybe a little vulnerable, maybe he felt a little betrayed in some way. I don't know how he felt. And he chose to just turn all of that into vitriol. And he actually was throwing that Churchill quote at me and calling me a quitter and, all this kind of stuff. And I appreciated his cojones to be as brash as he was. And it gave me reason to think. And I thought, am I being a quitter? Am I being a quitter? Because that's something I'm sensitive to. Am I being a quitter? And no, because it's a means whereby. It was always a means whereby. His vision, I don't know what his life's about. For him, maybe that's the be all end all. So he's going to go down with the Titanic and he's going to figure this is it for him. This isn't it for me. This was a means whereby. And it's sad, but it's time to move on. So it's important to be able to, for yourself, doesn't matter what anybody else does, that doesn't matter, but for yourself, to be able to know when it's time to keep going and when it's time to recognize that maybe there's another road to get to where you're going.
So good, man. So powerful. I think one of the reasons, we always hear people say like, whatever your passion is, you need to do that because you'll be the most successful at it. I think I've thought a lot about why is that? Why is it you'll be more successful at your passion? Because I think it's a true statement, but it's, to me, the question has been, why is that? And I know that I've found with what we do with Hope, but also in talking with so many people like yourself that have really found a niche and working their passion. One of the things that I think is true is that you will do it whether you're profitable at it or not. You will do it when everyone else isn't because you love it. And so loving your passion is intimately connected. It's inseparably connected to the outcome of success. And you will be more successful at it because you don't think about it in terms of how do I do this to get that? which is what you said, the means whereby, but you think of it more in the terms of how do I do this so that I can do this? And
Right.
like you said, as long as you let me be here, you can call me whatever you want.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I love that, because that is the reason why living your passion, focusing on your passion, it really truly is what you will be most successful at. And only people who are real leaders will succeed in that way. And so again, man, I just more than all the things that people know you as, and that you have been, all the accolades and success you have had, whether they call you Patrick or they call you James or they call you Mr. Lynch or they call you whatever, I am proud to call you my friend. And we would not know each other had it not been for many, many, many painful days that you and I both have experienced with a little well-known disease named hemophilia. So
That is
I'm
very
grateful for
true.
the hardships just so that we can have these victories and these deep friendships in the middle of it. So good to see you.
I hear
Thank you
you.
so much for being a part of this weekend and speaking truth to us. We needed it so bad. And man, I just appreciate all that you do. Keep it going. Is there anything else that you would like to announce, or anything you got coming down the line with new projects?
Thanks, man. The Bloodstream podcast, which you can find on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anywhere that podcasts are available, that's generally the best way to keep up with us. We're actually moving to a weekly schedule starting the week of July 20th. So if you're interested to know what we're up to, and we do try to, bring you what we consider to be some of the biggest news stories out there as well. So I do like to think of it as a little pulse check on the community. So the Bloodstream podcast is probably the best way. There's 3 things I'll shout out though going on at BDC for those who are attending the virtual BDC coming up here. The Teen Impact Awards you may have heard of. We're doing the 6th Teen Impact Awards this year, where 58 teens from the community will be recognized in a completely virtual Teen Impact Awards, which has been a lot of fun to produce. We have the Science Fair, which was part of the 2019 BDC in the exhibit hall. We have a completely virtual science fair this year with interactive modules. There's also a Believe at Home box that you can sign up for that has magnet sets that connect to the modules of the science fair. So that's going to be part of the BDC as well. And you can go to believeltd.com for more on those boxes. And then lastly, we've been working on a documentary about mental health and bleeding disorders for a little over a year. And we're going to be screening what has become called Let's Talk as part of a session with NHF during the conference as well. So there's a mental health, I should know this off the top of my head. It's that Friday, the 6th or 7th, something like that. But you'll see it in your schedule. It's called Let's Talk. Again, the Bloodstream podcast, or track me down, Patrick James Lynch, on social media if you want more information about it. But if you are someone or someone in your family has challenges as it relates to the mental, emotional well-being, whether or not that connects directly to a bleeding disorder, this is a film that's been made for you. It's been made for people, and we've tried to give as many different experiences voice within the limited cast we have for a 45-minute film. I will say what is shared from such a place of honesty. And Jonathan, to talk about speaking truth, so much truth spoken in this thing by people from all across the country, different ages, different life experiences, different bleeding disorders, different relationship to bleeding disorders. And it just makes it very clear that our mental well-being is something none of us can take for granted. And it absolutely connects to the life we live as somebody with a bleeding disorder, or as somebody who cares for someone in the household with a bleeding disorder. They're inextricable, ultimately, from a lived experience point of view. So Let's Talk is something I'm very proud of as well. So those would be the 3 Believe Limited virtual BDC programs to shout out.
That's awesome. Well, we can't wait to see it. And look, hey, we're all about this virtual thing. It's been wonderful to be able to hang out, especially like you and I. I had a friend of mine the other day that told me, he says, Jonathan, this is just like us getting teleported because we're in the same room, but we're not. And it kind of feels a little bit that way. So, man, thank you again so much for all you're doing. We can't wait to see that content. I'm sure that we'll tune in. And hey, listen, I just want to circle back to one of the first things you said, and just for the audience out there, anybody that's listening, is to really zero into that book, Built to Last by Jim Collins you mentioned. passion. That's a great book on leadership. You can look it up. We'll put the link in the comments just so that you can see it. But man, make sure that you do exactly what Patrick said, and that is to fill yourself and with good information, surround yourself with good people, continue to cultivate that passion, make it something tangible by making it into bite-sized pieces that you can put on a timeline, and let's continue to shoot for the stars, because the ultimate thing is really that we all are activated in both our skill and our passion for a meaningful purpose. So keep up the great work, Patrick, and we'll talk to you again soon here before too long.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for having me, man.
All right, take care.
You too.